I have always been a bit of a skeptic when it comes to ghosts, but I'm open-minded. I personally have never seen a ghost. Sometimes in the corner of my eye, I notice something, but I dismiss it as my imagination. But what if there was someone or something there?
It's just in your head, Greg.
I've met people, and I will meet many more, who believe they have encountered something strange. They tell me stories of the events of that night. I love hearing ghost stories and tales of the paranormal. They give me shivers. But until I see something myself, not just in the corner of my eye, I'm going to struggle to believe. Come with me as I take you on a tour to various locations where ghosts have been seen on Gower, and learn the paranormal stories with me as I go along. My name is Greg Ballantyne, and this is Paranormal Gower. Oystermouth Castle, rooted in the heart of Mumbles, was built in the 12th century. This castle was home to many lords of Gower for hundreds of years. In the dungeons of the castle, you can still see the remains of a whipping post, a frightening reminder of what took place here and in other castles around Gower. This whipping post is linked to the first ghost on our journey. There have been sightings of a lady haunting the castle and its grounds. Locals and tourists alike have stories to tell. A lady crying dressed in white with open wounds on her back. It is thought she'd been killed in the castle, but who she was and what she did is unknown. Witnesses say she is not seen for long, and once seen she turns, displaying the wounds on her back. She fades away. There is a theory that the lady is Eynon de Breos, the oldest daughter of William de Breos, Lord of Gower. The Breos family occupied Oystermouth Castle during the 13th and early 14th century. They hosted the then King of England, Edward I, at Oystermouth in 1284. Eynon married John de Mowbray, who had many disputes with King Edward II, which led to Mowbray's execution. Eynon was imprisoned in the Tower of London, but later freed by Edward III. She died in 1331. Could there be a link between Eynon and the sightings of a lady roaming around the castle? Is this ghost real? Many suffered at the whipping post in the dungeons of this castle. Did this lady die here? Is she still here? Pennard, a quiet, secluded beach on Gower, is full of tales, mysteries and ghost sightings dating back centuries. I touched upon the story of a female ghost at Pennard in part 5 of A Bit of History About Gower. This ghost is well known locally, and I would be remiss not to include her in this video. There have been many sightings at Pwllheli of a lady in white. There is an old story that a serving girl who worked in the Beaufort, one of the old pubs at Pwllheli, became pregnant out of wedlock, and tragically she took her own life. All reported sightings have similar characteristics. Tourists unfamiliar with the area and its history tell the same story the locals do. A young girl in a white dress clutching a small bundle to her chest. She appears on the bridge at Pwllheli, walking the valley, and in the Beaufort itself. There is a story of a man who lived at Pwllheli, and when coming home from work one evening, he saw a ghost of a woman in white on this bridge. He was so scared, he turned around and went back through the flooded river behind him. When he got home, he was terrified, drenched, claiming he'd seen a ghost. In 1760, a ship called the Caesar ran aground at Pwllheli Point. The Caesar was carrying over 60 press-ganged men who tragically lost their lives. Where the ship sank is called Caesar's Hole. The men who lost their lives are buried at Pwllheli Head, and the area where they are buried is called Gravesend. You can find out much more information about the Caesar shipwreck in A Bit of History About Gower Part 1. Distant crying has been heard at Pwllheli. Could this be the lady in white, or possibly one of the press gang men unable to escape the Caesar? Pennard Castle, overlooking Three Cliffs Bay, is associated with a number of mysterious events. For a century, people have reported hearing screaming from the direction of the castle. Some connect these screams to an old tale of a woman who threw herself in the river at Three Cliffs. Others link these screams to fairies who are said to curse this castle. Folklore tells us of a Welsh magician who built Pennard Castle in one day and one night. However, during this time, the magician had conflict with another magician who cast a spell on the castle, causing it to fall down. Battling magicians is well known in British folklore. There is another story of a Welsh chieftain who lived in Pennard Castle. This chieftain was the victor of many battles, but one battle in particular promised a great reward: the daughter of a Welsh prince. Captivated with love for one another, the prince's daughter consented to be the chieftain's wife. In celebration, a banquet was thrown at Pennard Castle. Music and song shook the walls. The celebration was interrupted when soldiers of the chieftain witnessed strange lights on Three Cliffs Bay, as if another party was taking place. The chieftain, enraged, charged down the hillside to attack those who had disturbed his banquet. When they arrived, the chieftain and his soldiers realised this wasn't any old party, but a group of fairies dancing around colourful lights. The chieftain knew nothing else but to attack these fairies. Little did he know, these fairies were immune. They could be seen, but not touched by man. The chieftain's sword passed through their bodies as if through water. The attack merely angered the fairies. They put a curse on the chieftain. Clouds of sand came over the castle at great speed, and within a few minutes, the castle was a ruin, buried in sand. The curse also meant the prince's daughter would never conceive a child. Pennard Castle would be cursed forever. The spectacle of lights drifting along the walls of Pennard Castle is one of the most bizarre sights on Gower. The first recorded sighting of these lights dates back to the 19th century, ruling out a modern technological explanation. Are the lights seen by many, even to this day, linked to the magician who cursed the castle? Or maybe it's the fairies ensuring their curse remains? Pennard Castle is a great example of how a castle on Gower with its deep history going back centuries accumulates myths, legends and tales told as bedtime stories to this day. Gower, with its many secluded bays, provides the perfect location for smugglers. Most of the smuggling activities on Gower took place during the 17th and 18th century, but smaller scale smuggling did continue into the 19th century. Pulfdy Bay was the ideal location for smuggling because of its access to Bishopston Valley, providing the perfect passage to smuggle goods into Gower and beyond. Rectory Bay has its own smuggling stories to tell. Wreckers at Rectory would keep an eye out for passing cargo ships heading down the Bristol Channel. These ships would carry goods which coastal dwellers could profit on. The wreckers would use lanterns to lure ships onto the rocks with sinister intent. They are likely responsible for a number of shipwrecks recorded at Rectory. One such wreck, the Dollar Ship, named for its cargo of Spanish silver dollars, fell upon the rocks at Rectory in the 17th century. There is an old tale that the wreckers employed a young girl to work for them. At first she was working well and obeying, but one day she rebelled. She set part of the hillside alight, creating a beacon which would warn off an approaching cargo ship, disrupting the wreckers' plan. The legend goes that she was moved by a religious sermon of the wrongs and evils of wrecking. In the coming days, she disappeared. No one knows what happened to her. Some say the wreckers who employed her threw her off the cliffs at Rectory. People have reported hearing crying in the direction of Worm's Head, and there have been sightings of a young girl wandering alone. From the perspective of the wreckers, the young girl cost them dearly by warning off the approaching cargo ship. But others would remember her for having a change of heart and saving the ship from being wrecked. The old rectory, built in the 1850s, is roughly located halfway between Rectory Bay and Llangenith. It is the only building on this stretch of coast. The building is said to be one of the most haunted houses in Wales. There are reports of a couple in Edwardian clothing walking in the house and its grounds. Those who pass nearby talk about a sudden drop in temperature and hearing voices behind them. There are also reports of a phantom riding on horseback across the bay. This apparition is supposedly John Ponsonby Lucas, who served as the Reverend for Llangennith and Rectory in the 19th century. He keeps a watchful eye on the old rectory. The Reverend was known for riding his horse between Rectory and Llangennith to reach his loyal parishioners. If you are walking on a stormy evening at Rectory, you may come across the ghost of Squire Mansell on his carriage being pulled by 4 horses. It is thought he is looking for treasure which has been lost somewhere on the bay. Some say it was Squire Mansell who made off with most of the cargo from the dollar ship wrecked at Rectory, that he broke into the wreck under the cover of darkness. The locals, having heard rumours of the ship's contents, had been disputing over how the silver should be shared. Squire Mansell disappeared shortly after claiming the treasure. Some say he fled the country, others that he was murdered and that his body was hidden somewhere on the bay. These stories are part of the fabric of Gower. The geography, the history, the folklore are entwined. Ghosts, fairies, real or imagined, haunt this place, from the castles to the coast.